evacuees. So tonight I'm going to talk about how to deal with immediate stress, kind of like an anxiety attack, kind of as you're going through something. And tomorrow we're going to talk about chronic stress and what to do about that. So the first thing is, when we're in a situation where we have lost control, anxiety creeps in. And I can stand here before you today and tell you I've never been in a fire or a flood, but I have actually been torn away from my home for a whole year with just the clothes on my back. So I understand just a little bit of what it's like to have to leave everything and be gone, just a little bit. And so with that, I can speak from experience. And the first thing that I learned was that when we go through a moment that's really stressful, the first thing that tends to go is our breathing. So we're going to talk about breathing, we're going to talk about water intake, we're going to talk about nutrition. Now, I don't know if you've ever been driving along, but when you get tense and you get tight, do you ever notice sometimes you stop breathing? Ever notice that you're driving along and all of a sudden you just you take a big breath because we've been holding our breath. We're intense in traffic or we're intense in a situation. And so the first thing I want to just practice with you tonight is to breathe. So whenever we come into a situation where it's just really, really tough, you don't know what to do, you start feeling anxious, the first thing is to breathe. So how about we take 3 deep breaths tonight, if you can, through your mask. For those of you, just with me, if you will, just breathe in, slowly out. Now, really what they say is to make it over 5 seconds. So if you can breathe in for 5 seconds, ready? Here we go. And then out. Now, if you can practice doing 3 of those breaths, first 5 seconds, and then get it to where you're slowly breathing in through your nose and then out through your mouth, and do that 3 times, you will find that all of a sudden you feel better. You have more oxygen to your brain. You are, feeling a little bit more energized because you're really getting what your body needs. Is the first thing is oxygen. So be sure to breathe deeply at least 3 times when you find yourself in a situation that is anxiety inducing, where you don't know what to do. The next thing is sometimes when we have a moment where we can't deal with it, maybe we get angry or we start shaking and we feel afraid. The next thing to do is to walk, if you can. In that moment, just say, you know what? I need to walk. Even if it's here on campus, let me just walk up and down the street and breathe. And what that does is it gets all of the cortisol moving out of your system. And so here's the real enemy. And it is cortisol. Cortisol is what is released when we're under a stressful situation. Cortisol is good if you have to run from a bear. It's great if you got a lion, that's next to you and it's running after you, because it increases your heart rate and increases your blood pressure, and it allows you to have this superhuman boost of energy. Have you heard of people like lifting cars in a situation, right, and outrunning some kind of animal? Well, that's because they had adrenaline on board. And cortisol is responsible for that. Wonderful to save your life. But if that stress and that cortisol level remains high for more than just that hour or two to save your life, where it goes on for days or maybe weeks or months, it causes damage to our body. We're going to talk more about that long term later on. But when you think about just the short term, we know that cortisol can, even in the short term, cause us to be forgetful, cause us to not be able to make decisions in that moment, cause us to be trembly, and all of those other things that come along with adrenaline. So we want to make sure to take a moment to breathe, and then if you need to walk, and that kind of helps move that cortisol and adrenaline out of your system, so that way your mind can think more clearly in that moment. So those are the first 2 things that are important. The last thing tonight that I'll talk about, there'll be more later, but the last thing is when you find yourself in a moment where maybe you've been busy and haven't paid attention to your body, this is really important. Oftentimes we forget to drink water. And drinking water is essential for us. So we can live about 3 weeks without food. We can live about 2 or 3 days without water. And what happens is if we are 1% dehydrated, we are 50% more exhausted and more tired. So we can become dehydrated real quick, even in just 6 hours. If we're not drinking water, our body begins to feel it. Some of the side effects of dehydration are inability to think clearly, fatigue, exhaustion. Goes along with fatigue, but you really feel exhausted. Headaches. How many of you have taken a glass of water with an Advil or a Tylenol and you think, oh, I feel much better? Well, most of the time it's the water that you drank, not just the medicine. But a lot of times our bodies get dehydrated and we don't even know it. So we really need to be drinking water all through the day. For men, do you know how much men are supposed to drink every day? Half your body weight? That's good. That's a lot of water for some people. Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about water. So our body is made up of 60% water. 60% of water. Our brains use 73% water, right? Our lungs, 83%. Now, we've been dealing with a fire here, and lungs have probably been affected, in some cases. So how important is it for you to get water? Because the water goes in and it lubricates our organs, it moves out waste, it brings in oxygen, it does so many wonderful things. So what we want to be sure to do is drink enough water. So men need 3.5 quarts a day minimum, and women need 2.5 quarts a day. So 3.5 quarts, you can say a gallon of water, women, I think a gallon as well. When you are stressed, when you're exercising, when you're doing all of that, you probably need more. Now, some of this you're going to get from your food. And some of you may not like the taste of water, so you might want to add lemon to it or some other fruit. But we want to encourage you to drink that water. That's going to help your body actually deal with the stress, the immediate stress that you're feeling. So first, we need to breathe. Second, we need to move our bodies whenever we can. And third, we need to drink water. Those 3 things are going to help with some immediate stressors that you're dealing with. And we're going to talk more about all of that tomorrow as far as long-term stress-reducing exercises. Sound good? Okay. Well, thank you so much for the moment, the health nugget. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
I want to share with you something a little different. Sometimes we look at tragedy, and not sometimes, oftentimes, in fact, most times, we look at tragedy, we look at pain, we look at suffering, and we think, what a horrible thing, and it is. But have you ever stopped to think about tragedy and crisis and stop to think, wait a minute, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know this. In other words, sometimes tragedy, sometimes pain, sometimes sorrow, sometimes these experiences that we encounter in life, that we go through in life, actually help to shape and to direct our lives in such a way that after we have gone through that horrible experience and have come out on the other side, we would say and we would think, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Sometimes we go through these painful experiences, and these painful experiences are hard and difficult and sorrowful. But sometimes those experiences can change the course of our lives in such a way that amazing, powerful, incredible good can be the result of that. One example for me was what happened April 9th, 1999. 21 and a half years ago. I was in a different state of mind. I was in a different place than I am today. I lived in Michigan. In fact, this is the beautiful thing with Michigan. I can literally point to where I used to live. I used to live right here in Southwest Michigan in a city called Grand Rapids. Anyone ever heard of Grand Rapids? Oh, yeah, okay. Grand Rapids, Michigan. I grew up there. But my life in Grand Rapids was a life of the average life of a young person that is attracted by the things of this world, if you will. I was musically inclined. I was musically, I don't want to say gifted, but music was a big part of my life, and so I wanted to achieve something great through music, and I was well on my way. But in the midst of a world of fun and pleasure and excitement and things, my world came crashing down April 11th, 1999. Now, I mentioned to you April 9th was when my life changed, but my world came crashing down April 11th, 1999. April 9th, my father lost his life in a very unexpected way. He had a massive heart attack. We didn't even know he had heart disease. My father was a great pillar to me, a strong fortress, just a counselor, a guide, a confidant, a friend. He was a very, very important person in my life. And unexpectedly, my father passed away, but I didn't learn of it on April 9th. I learned of it on April 11th. April 9th was a Friday night, and where I was that Friday night was at a club, DJing and partying and having a good time with my career, so I thought, with my excitement and with these things that brought seeming joy or pleasure to me. Let me back up. Thursday night, April 8th. I was somewhere, and at about 10:30 at night, my cell phone rings. And I was in a place that you don't answer when it's your mom or your father calling. Although I was old and I lived on my own, I still had respect and decency for them. So when my phone rang, I said, my dad was calling. It's 10:30 at night. No. I'll send him the voicemail. And I kept going, doing the things that I was doing in that place that Thursday night. But as soon as I sent him the voicemail, 30 seconds later, my phone would ring again. I'd send him the voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. And by this time, I'm like, okay, my father's trying to get my attention. There may be something. I'm going to step outside. I'm going to get rid of him, and I'm going to come back in. That's what I thought. And so I go outside. I answer the phone. Hey, Dad. And my father was the kind of man that you didn't let talk. Because if you let him talk, he'll convince you out of anything. He was good at convincing me. And so I knew I needed to dominate the conversation. So I picked up the phone. Hey, Dad, how are you? Good. Listen, I'm really busy right now. I'm taking care of something. Let me call you back. And my dad, I heard him say, son, it's important. I need to talk to you. Yeah. But I knew my dad, this is important. This is just his way of hooking me in. Yeah, I know. I'll call you back as soon as I'm free. Don't worry, I'll call you back. And my father, at that moment, was very perceptive. He could tell I was not interested in whatever he had. And so he says, okay, son, don't forget. Last words of the whole conversation. No, don't worry, I won't forget. I didn't even wait for him to say bye. I didn't even say bye. I won't forget. Well, no, I think I did say bye. And I hung up the phone, and I went in, and I went through that night, and I kept on doing what I was doing, and I got home at about 3:30 in the morning that Thursday or Friday morning, and you know what I forgot? I forgot to call my father. In fact, that next day, April 9th, I forgot The next day, April 10th, Saturday, I forgot. I was partying the whole weekend. April 11th. It's about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm at my house, still sleeping, and I hear banging. Fierce, almost violent banging at my front door downstairs. I'm awoken to my door seemingly being broken down by SWAT team, but I'm afraid. I don't want to get up. I don't want to go to the door. And then I hear yelling, and I can hear yelling saying, "Eddie, open the door, Eddie, I need to come in." And I can tell that's my brother, my older brother, 3 years older than I. He's yelling, he's weeping. I couldn't tell what was going on. When I could tell it was him, I got up. When the door opens and I see my brother's face, I had never seen sorrow in my brother's face like I seen that morning. Never seen pain so vivid. Never seen regret and remorse. And I've never seen my brother cry like that. What happened? And he tells me the story of how my father missed an appointment with him earlier that day, and that he was worried about my father and went to his house and found out when he got to his house that there was policemen and fire trucks. And my father lived in one of the high-rise buildings in downtown Grand Rapids on the 9th floor. And when my brother says that when I went into the lobby and I hit the buzzer to buzz my father's apartment, the door opens and a policeman asks me, "Who are you looking for?" My brother tells him, "I'm looking for my father." "What's your father's name?" "Eduardo Perez." The policeman looks at my brother and says, "Sir, I'm so sorry. Your father has passed away. It appears that your father has passed away a couple of days ago, at least Thursday or Friday. Today is Sunday morning. The smell is so strong that the tenants called and we had to break the door open. I'm so sorry." And my brother leaves straight away my father's house and drives to mine, and that's the encounter that I had with him that morning. And it was at that moment when my brother tells me, "Dad's dead." It was at that moment that I remembered the phone call that I had with my father Thursday night, that I blew him off. And it was then that his last two words came ringing to my mind and ringing to my head and ringing in my ears. And it was a painful reminder. Don't forget. And I forgot. I forgot to call my father back. I forgot to reach out to him. I was so inconsiderate and so selfish and so absorbed in my own world that I didn't even know what was wrong with him. I didn't even know why he called. And perhaps because of my negligence, because of my neglect, because of my blowing him off, my father fell asleep in the Lord. April 11th, my life changed forever. I didn't know how I was going to live with myself. I didn't know how I could handle the guilt, the pain, the regret, the remorse, and many things happened as a consequence of that day, that when we think about it And now, standing back 21 years later, I can tell you, I went through that horrible tragedy. I lost one of the most significantly important people in my life. I lost my father. Very likely because of my own inaction. But 21 years later, I can step back and I can look at that experience and say, if it wasn't for that, if I wouldn't have lost my father, I wouldn't have found my way. I wouldn't have found my way back. You might say, find your way where? Well, that'll have to be a story for tomorrow evening. But tonight I want to just remind you that even though this life throws pain, even though this life offers us sorrow, and even though sometimes we lose things we don't expect, sometimes we could lose it all. I remember in 2008, I was working in Chicago, and I was living in a place called Broadview Academy. It's an academic institution that has faculty housing about 40 miles west of Chicago. And I was working the inner city of Chicago, but my house there was flooded. 80% of my things were destroyed and lost. Among those things lost, out of everything that I lost in that flood, there's one thing that to this day I feel sorrow, I feel loss, I feel that pain. And that thing is a simple 8mm home videotape. It was an 8mm home videotape that I made when my father, my brother, and I went on our last family vacation to New York City to visit family. And I had all kinds, probably an hour and a half of footage of my father and him talking and we laughing and joking. I mean, experiences that I wish I could treasure that so that my children and my grandchildren and we can, that's who your grandfather was. That's the one thing that out of everything that I lost was the one thing that I treasured the most. The wonderful thing is, let me tell you, I'll give you a little heads up about that journey back, that I lost my father to find my way. I found my way to Jesus. I found my way to a God that was more than just words in a song. I found my way back to a God that was not just a God that you hear of on the radio or you hear of in church or you read in a book or a pamphlet. No, I found my way back to a God who for me became as real as reality can ever be. And because I found that my way back, even though I went through that tragedy, even though I've lost something great, I know in whom I have believed, and I know the faith that I have. I know that this world is not all there is to life. There is more beyond the things of this earth. There is more beyond the pain. There is more beyond the grave. There is more beyond saying goodbye for the one last time. Because when I found my way back to Jesus, I realized and I discovered that there is hope beyond the ashes. There is life beyond the grave. There is a life that awaits each one that believes in him. An ancient wise person. Some call him a prophet. Some call him a good man. I call him Jesus Christ, my Lord, my Savior, my God. And he said to a Pharisee, a wise man of those days, one day at night when he came to visit him, Jesus said to Nicodemus, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Now, I didn't want to give my life to that kind of God until I memorized verse 17. Verse 17, most people, even agnostics, people, sometimes anybody could quote John 3:16, but few know John 3:17. Which says this, "For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him." See, I needed a relationship with a God that wasn't ready to condemn me because I didn't live up to his standard. I needed a relationship with a God that was not ready to push me away because I didn't fit his mold. No, I needed a relationship with a God that was willing to embrace me just as I was, messed up, rejecting, and possibly the reason why my father died. I discovered that God didn't reject me. I discovered that God didn't shoo me away, that God didn't hold me accountable for that God extended to me his forgiveness. And even though I went through that sorrowful experience, I had hope that one day, I will see my Father again. See, that's the difference when you find your way. The way leads us back together. It leads us to a place that does not promise ashes, does not overwhelm with flames. We go to a place that has a river of life. We are destined to a place that not only gives us pleasures forevermore. As hard and as impossible for our finite minds to grasp the concept, nonetheless, it's still reality. We are destined for a place that we shall live eternally, forever. No threat of pandemic, no threat of any virus, no threat of terrorism, natural disasters, a place that we can live life and live it more abundantly. It took me losing two of the most important people in a human being's life, their mother, and in my case, my father. Took me losing my father to find my way. Leave you with one last thought. Ever since I can remember, my father would always tell me in Spanish. He kind of prepared me for something, and I didn't understand it when I was young. I didn't understand it at that time. But he would tell me, "Son," let me see if I can translate it. I'll say it in Spanish, then I'll translate it. "Hijo, tienes que buscar la ganancia en la pérdida, misericordia en el dolor y éxito en el aparente fracaso." Here's what that means. Son, you need to educate your mind to look for a gain in a loss. You might have lost something, but you actually gained. You need to look for mercy through sorrow and victory in an apparent defeat. I don't know what your destiny holds. I don't know what your future has in store, but I guarantee you that there is a God that reigns in heaven, the creator of heaven and earth, and this God has plans for your life. Great, high, lofty, In fact, an ancient book called the Bible, in a little section called 2 Corinthians, is divided into chapters, chapter 2, and then it has divided by verses. So you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 9, and it says this: for it is written, as it is written, things that ears have not heard, eyes have not seen, neither has it entered into the heart of man, are the things that God has prepared for them that love him. God has something great for each one of you. God has something destined, glorious, that your mind can't even conceive of. The question is, will you be courageous enough? Will you be brave enough? Will you be valiant enough to believe? Because he says, for God so loved the world that he gave it all. He gave it all. He gave his life. He gave his life for you. He gave his life for me. And one day, he has promised to come and take us to be with him forever. I will meet my Father again. Notice how I say it. I say it with that assurance, with that certainty. Absolutely. I will see my Father, and he and I will enjoy eternity together. Why? Because my Father always walked in the way. It was I that drifted. More on that tomorrow, if you'll have me back. Tonight, I leave you with Jesus. There's not a more beautiful name on earth that can satisfy the longing's heart desire than Jesus Christ. What will you do with Jesus? I pray it will be to believe. Please allow me to briefly pray. Loving Father, I thank you for this opportunity in this open air sanctuary, in this very special moment in time in each one of our lives, and in the hearing of those that can hear this prayer just now. I pray that your grace would cover each one, that your power and your protection will be poured out on each one, and that your love and your will guide us. We love you, and we thank you for not rejecting us. Bless us tonight and always. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.